Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. How are we all doing today? Hello, Rick. A big crowd, Baruch Hashem. Okay. If you're watching, if you're Kim and you're here in person and you're online, I just went online, so you should be able to see me. Let me know if you see me. Well, let's make that straight. Okay, Erev Tov, Harold. So on Chabad.org, we got Harold as the first one. Baruch Hashem, good evening. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready. Let's see who's watching us online. If you're watching us on my personal page, oh, let's see, good, I knew this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarim. She's in the meeting. She's still with my wife. They're planning. That's why. It's delicious. Mwah. We were planning Purim. So, for everyone to know, you heard it here first. March 14th, Purim will be Purim in the Palace. Will be a murder mystery Purim Palace intrigue. Might not be called. We had a name, not Purim. We had a name. Purim Palace something. I forgot. We already had a name. March 14th is Purim. Put this in your calendar, my friends. March 14th is a Friday. It is going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Many people. So I will just tell you before we start. Oh, hello, Kim. I see you. Hello, Gail. How are you? Just quickly before we start, because I have a really good class ready for tonight. But our parties are always, whoever been to our Purim party knows that we do the best Purim parties ever. And yet, of all of our Purim parties, without a doubt, one of the best. And we've done, I think, 16 or 17 Purim parties. This will be Purim party number 17. Purim party number 17 coming up. And they've all been successes. Baruch Hashem. There's not been one not great party. But many people have told me that one of the best was the Purim of 4 years ago, March 2021, when it was COVID. We did it outside in the parking lot. It was also a Friday night of Purim. And if you remember, you were there, we strung up lights. We had a very competitive, we did a whole bunch of games. Everyone had a few l'chayims, and we played some games, competitive games on the tables. And the energy and the ruach and the spirit was just, we had a lot of fun that night. It's a Friday night. So it's going to be a Friday night dinner. And is it Friday night here this year again? Yeah, so it's going to be on Friday night. We'll start at 5:30, and we'll go into the night, late into the night, God willing. So we'll stop in the middle. We'll light candles. We'll do the main course. We'll have an amazing time. Anyway, that's just a word from our sponsor. Okay. The word from the sponsor. Okay.
That was in March of 2021?
2021. March of 2020. We didn't know it was COVID yet. COVID had just come to America that week. Like no one knew. Yeah, not here, but yes, in New York. Purim was definitely helped spread along the germs.
Yeah, March of 2020 is when
it started, but Purim, I don't remember the date of Purim of 2020, but like we didn't know about COVID really yet. It was in China there was COVID. It was like, it wasn't really here. We just came to America like that week. Anyway, okay. So Gail has enjoyed some amazing Purim parties. Gail, you should definitely come. This year, March 14th, is going to be, I think, one of the best. We got our committee working on it. Part of why it's the best is we have people to help us. So that's okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Tonight's class, first and foremost, is dedicated in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef. Secondly, today's class is going to be in the tremendous honor of Danielle Gilboa and Karina Ariev and Naama Levy and Liri Albag, and especially Agam Berger, who are the 5 female hostages, the lookout soldiers that were kidnapped on October 7th on Simchas Torah. And I already spoke about this, but I'm going to tell you why I'm saying it again. These girls, they kept Shabbos, some more than others, while they were in captivity. Agam Berger was completely Shomer Shabbos. She didn't work as a slave, and saying being a domesticated slave in some senior Hamas person's home. She refused to cook. They didn't eat chametz on Pesach. They fasted on Yom Kippur, which is truly an amazing, mind-blowing, boggling thing to be able to have the frame of mind that when food was so scarce for them, and yet to fast on Yom Kippur, to not eat for 8 days, they would get a little bit of pita. That's what they were, to not be able to eat for so long on Pesach and to keep Shabbat is an amazing thing. Not only them, but some of the male hostages also. Keith Siegel was making Kiddush on Friday night. And then this morning I was reading that Eli Sharabi and Or Levi and Ohad Ben Ami, who were released as past Shabbat, unfortunately they were in terrible, terrible conditions. They were literally kept in one tiny tunnel for 491 days, chained like cattle, chained. They were chained for most of the time that they were there. They were chained. They were not able to walk. They had to learn how to walk again before they were released. They were given like a week of relative freedom where they weren't chained to be able to walk. And right now, there's two other hostages that were with them. Ohad, Ariel Ohad, maybe I'm going from memory. I don't remember the names. Her mother was interviewed. His mother was interviewed. There's two more hostages that are not, for whatever reason, on this list that are alive in this tunnel that were with them that are currently, as we speak, chained up in terrible, terrible, terrible conditions, without food, without air, without the ability to stand, without shoes, without anything, literally without anything. And what they described they had to go through, the little bit that's coming out to us, we only know a little bit of the torture that they went through, the quote-unquote interrogations that they went through, being hung upside down by their feet, being branded, being burnt, being gagged, being strangulated. They were tortured in terrible ways, and they didn't know when was day, when was night. They were in a tunnel for 491 days with zero sunlight, zero outside, no TV, no radio. They didn't know anything. They didn't know that what happened October 7th. They literally had no outside news for 491 days, besides for whatever psychological manipulation their captors wanted to tell them is what they told them, which they didn't know what to believe, what not to believe. They didn't know anything. They didn't know some of them came out with their families have been killed on Simchat Torah. They didn't know. And yet I read this morning that although they didn't have any way of knowing day or night, they went sometimes for days without food. But then they get like one moldy pita to share. Sometimes only some of them would get food. Sometimes they wouldn't be given food. Their captors would eat in front of them. They kept track of their days to keep their sanity. And every Friday, they made Kiddush. They did the Friday night services. They didn't always have wine. They didn't always have wine. They probably never had wine. They didn't always have food. They were saying, you can make Kiddush on bread. They were Friday nights, so they didn't know the exact time of candle lighting, but they more or less knew the days. And every single Friday, they would have a Shabbat service of some sort and make Kiddush. And when I read that, although I had in my mind maybe a different idea for tonight's class, I said, this is amazing. This is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Here are 5 men actually, that are chained, literally chained in an underground tunnel for 491 days. And that's we can't begin to understand what kind of, besides for the physical trauma that has on your body, the emotional, psychological trauma being chained, where you can't stand for so long, what it could do to your brain. And yet, here are these people that comes Friday, and they're guessing approximately, we're going to guess that it's probably Friday night. They get up, they take time, and they make Kiddush, and they say prayers with no food, no wine, no Shabbos table, no candles, no white tablecloth, no chicken soup, no matzah balls, no gefilte fish, and they're still making Kiddush. And when I saw that, there was such first of all, just a deep pride, a deep sense like, wow, these people are amazing. Absolutely amazing. And as we spoke about this 2 weeks ago about Agam Berger, who's another hero. These are amazing heroes. So Agam Berger's mother, Meirav Berger, asked that no one should desecrate the Shabbos for her daughter when she'll be released. She was not released in the first, four of the 5 female soldiers were released without her. And because she didn't, I'm jumping ahead, but because she said publicly, I don't want anyone to violate the Shabbos for me and my daughter, and she's going to wait for her daughter to come, etc. The way it ended up working out is that they came out early, not on Shabbos. Her daughter came out 2 days earlier with 2 other people, and the next Shabbos, everything got moved up, which means the fact that Eli Sharabi and Or Levi and Ohad Ben Ami are not in the tunnel right now is because everything got moved up by 3 people because Mirav Berger said, I don't want to violate the Shabbos before my daughter. And this is not only what she was doing in Israel. Her daughter, Agam, was doing that in Gaza. And Ali Sharabi and Or Levi, they were in Gaza, in a tunnel, they were doing this. And as I spoke 2 weeks ago, there's 3 different kinds of time. The Rebbe writes in the letter. Some people go through time in a depressing way. It's depressing time. What is depressing time? Time just ticks by. Time goes, whether you like it or not. Some people, and time is just ticking away, and there's nothing, nothing to do. Sadly, go to, assisted living, go to old age home. People are sitting and they have nothing to do all day. And time is just, it's a depressing time. It's a heavy time, has no purpose. It's a time without purpose. Then you have people that are productive with their time. Every day has a purpose, has a mission, has a reason. They get up, they're going to work, they're going to here, they have things to accomplish and things to do. They're going to meet with people, they're going to learn things, they're going to grow, and they find ways to ensure that their time is not empty time. It's not depressing time, but it's time which is fulfilled. Time which is productive, time which is being utilized to become better, to become more educated, to become more knowledgeable, to go to classes, to learn, to help, to share, to make your time valuable. But the very first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, when the Jews are still slaves in Egypt, even before they left slavery, what's the very first mitzvah that God gives to the Jewish people? Anyone knows? I'm looking at the chat. Good evening, everyone that's watching. What's the first mitzvah that God gave to the Jewish people while they were still slaves in Egypt? Before the Pesach Seder, before the Paschal Lamb, before in the same so to say speech, when God tells Moshe about not Shabbos to take the lamb and to prepare it, and on the 14th day they'll slaughter it and they'll put the blood on the doorpost, on the matzah and the maror. Before all that, God says to Moshe, the opening verse, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, nobody knows, can't believe it. HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chadashim. This shall be for you a new month. Rishon hu lachem l'chadshei hashana, to count the calendar, to count the months of the year, and the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, of counting months and of counting years, of a calendar, is the first mitzvah. Yeah, open up the Bible, chapter 12. It was 2 weeks ago's Torah reading. 2 weeks ago's Torah reading. It's chapter 12. Is the opening. This is the first mitzvah. Then the next verse says to take the sheep and to prepare it for a Paschal lamb and the Seder and the matzah and the maror. It's all afterwards. We've talked about this before. But the point is, what's the first thing that God is telling the Jewish people? The first thing God is saying to the Jewish people is that you have to be masters over time. You need to be the masters who are not only allowing time to pass you by, to be an empty, meaningless, dead time that draws you down, that's depressing, where you're just waiting and waiting for the time to finish. Not only to try and infuse meaning into your time by doing meaningful things, by going to classes, by helping, by doing good things with your time, but you need to be the masters of the time. To keep a calendar means that I'm in charge. I'm keeping track. And we need to transcend time. We need to be holy time. Shabbos is holy time. Holidays are holy times. A prisoner, seemingly, what's the worst part about being a prisoner? You have no control over your time. When you're in the prison, you don't decide what time to go to sleep. You don't decide what time to get up. You don't decide what time to eat. You have no control over your time. When you're chained, physically chained into a tunnel for 491 days, it would seem like the gift of time had been robbed from Eli Sharabi and from Or Levi and from Ohad ben Ami and from the other 2 hostages that are still there. I wish I would have written down their names. One's Ariel Ohad, the 2 that are still there right now. And yet, because they were Jews and because they were connected to God Almighty, in the depth of the darkness of the tunnels of Gaza, they were able once a week to transcend time. They were able to transcend and to infuse a holiness and a sanctity into this terribly dark dungeon that they were being held in. And that's absolutely amazing. And as long as a Jew makes his time holy, you can never crush his spirit. These guys came out and they suffered terribly, and some of them came out to horrific news. But they're strong, and they're gonna come back. They're gonna rebound because their spirit is strong. Because even when it would seem like they had lost any kind of control over their time, every Friday they ensured that they would remain the masters over their time and making it a holy time. And so, in honor of these unbelievably brave Jewish heroes who literally gave up so much to risk everything just to keep Shabbos, I want to dedicate tonight's class, which will be on the fourth of the 10 Commandments, which is in this week's Torah reading. This week we're going to read the 10 Commandments. And what's the fourth of the 10 Commandments? Shabbos. Very good, Randy, very good, Robert. Shabbos. So let's analyze the mitzvah of Shabbos. Let us understand the reason why we keep Shabbos. That'll be the focus specifically on today, the reason why we rest on Shabbos. And this learning will be, first of all, for Refuah Shlema, for those that came out, all those hostages that are going through both physical and emotional, psychological healing, and not more importantly, but even more, those that are still keeping Shabbos in Gaza, those that are still somehow infusing a holiness into a time which seems to still be robbed from them. Our learning should be in their merit that B'ezrat Hashem very, very soon, even though Hamas is saying they're not going to listen to more hostages, I saw the news and whatever. I'm going to refrain from any comments off topic because there's a lot to say, but we won't say it. So, also in honor of Dudu Fisher. We had Dudu Fisher here Saturday night, we had Dudu Fisher performing here. Whatever. Dudu Fisher was here, he performed a beautiful, beautiful concert. And he shared the story of the sacrifice that he had to make to keep Shabbos. Real sacrifice.
It was a big one.
Big one. With first Lev Mizrav, where he wasn't going to take the job, and then they changed the schedule for him. And then when they wanted to invite him into the 35-year commemoration, whatever it was, a 30-year commemoration of the show, and have actors from all over the world come, and that was Erev Yom Kippur, and he was going to represent Israel on stage. He didn't go.
They made it on a Sunday just for him.
They made it on Sunday. A beautiful story. And the point is, here's an example of a modern-day guy living in the real world, so to say, and yet he chose to make Shabbos his priority. And when he was struggling, when months went by from when he told the director, Carmen was in it, whatever, that he's not going to play, not on Friday after Sunday, not on Saturday matinees, not when the stars go down. He comes to the Rebbe and he asks the Rebbe what to do, and the Rebbe told him, Halt stark, and I heard him say this story before, Halt stark in Yiddishkeit, stay strong in your Judaism, and everything is going to be good. And a few hours later, he got the phone call. They got the job. So these are modern-day heroes. These are people that have put holiness in their time above making money with their time, having fun with their time, just partying and enjoying life with their time. And they've understood the importance of infusing holiness and being masters over our time. So in their merit, of all of these, of Meirav Berger and Agam Berger, let's talk about the mitzvah of Shabbos. Okay? So, you all know, the fourth commandment is a pretty famous, well-known commandment, but you're going to see something quite interesting. So let's read it inside. And if you're watching on my screen, you can see the text. If you're at home, go to Exodus chapter 19. Torah says, Zachor es yom HaShabbos l'kadsho. Remember the Shabbos day to sanctify it, to make it holy. 6 days may you work and perform all your labor, but the seventh day is a Shabbos to the Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your beast, nor your stranger who is in your cities. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Shabbos day, and he sanctified it. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar. So a few things just to point out very quickly. is that what does it mean Hashem rested on the seventh day? Hashem doesn't work to rest, right? It's not like we go to work and we're tired and we're schwitzing and we're sweaty and we need to get a break. What does it mean Hashem rested? Was Hashem working? So without getting to this could be a whole class of its own, but the simple explanation that Rashi says is that God is teaching us a lesson, so to say, what we call in Hebrew a kal v'chomer, or an a priori argument is the English word. It's like God is saying to the Jewish people, don't be chacham, don't be too smart. I, that don't work, needed to rest, whatever that means. You for sure need a rest. You need a day of rest. If I need a rest, you for sure need rest. Okay, that's what Rashi explains. And Rashi also tells us that what does it mean? He blessed the seventh day and he sanctified the seventh day. Beirach et hayom, he blessed it. By Yikadasheu, he made a kodesh, he made a holy. So he blessed it by giving us the double portion of man. And he sanctified, made a holy by not giving us, on Friday, he gives us the double portion of man. And on Saturday, he made it holy by not giving the bread from heaven on Saturday. Meaning God blesses us that in 6 days, we should be able to make enough money to not need to work on Shabbos. Now on the seventh day, God made it holy that we shouldn't profane it by doing work and ruining the sanctity of Shabbos. Okay, so he blessed it and he made it holy. There's a lot more to say about this, but what I really want to focus on is the reason. What is the reason the Torah is telling us, or that God is telling us in the Ten Commandments, why are you meant to keep Shabbos? We just read it. Help me out, my friends. Shalom Shira, how are you? Hello, Stephanie. What is the reason? Why are we keeping Shabbos? Why are we not allowed to do work on the seventh day of the week?
It's a day of rest.
It's a day of rest. Go on more.
Because it's sanctified.
God blessed it and sanctified it, but why did he bless it and sanctify it? There's a reason. It says, therefore, why did he bless it? That there should be enough double on Friday, and sanctify that we shouldn't be allowed to work on Saturday? Why? It says in the reason, it says the text. Read. What does it say in the Ten Commandments? What is the reason why you are meant to not work on the seventh day of the week? Someone give me a text. Someone tell me you're read the Ten Commandments. God needed a break. God commanded us, that's true, but why did he command us? What does he want us to remember when he commands us to do this? Did I skip a verse? Oh, very good, Sidel. Stephanie's paying attention. Good job, Stephanie. Good job, Sidel. Let's read it again. Maybe we skipped the verse. Guys, read verse number 11. Let's read verse number 11. Why should you rest? Because in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Shabbos day and made it holy. The reason blessed and sanctified the seventh day of the week is because when God made the world in the very beginning, how many days did it take God to make the world? Again, I don't want to get distracted with the 6 days he worked, and on the seventh day he rested. And that's the reason why, so too we, every single week, to remember that God is the creator of the universe. He's not just as a God in heaven that, exists somewhere in the spiritual realms. God is the one that made the world in which we live. God made us. God made the trees. God made the water. God made money. God made business. God made everything. So by resting on the seventh day, we remember that God is the creator of the universe who created the world in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh. Therefore, we are meant to work for 6 days, and we rest on the seventh. Got it? Makes sense, right? You've all heard this before. I haven't said anything revolutionary yet. What? Yeah, that's correct. Yet. Now, you ready? Put on your seatbelt. Did you know that the Ten Commandments are not written one time in the Torah? They're actually written 2 times in the Torah. There's 2 times in the Torah where the Torah tells us the 10 Commandments. Now, are they the same in both places? The first time that we read the 10 Commandments is in this week's Torah reading, the Parsha of Yisro, when it's 49 days after the Jews left Egypt, and they come to Mount Sinai as God had said would happen when we left Egypt. The whole purpose was to go to Mount Sinai, and there we experience this tremendous revelation right? The thunder, the lightning, the smoke. And we hear God's voice booming. Boom, right? I am Lord your God. And God tells us the 10 commandments, including commandment number 4, keep Shabbos, to remember that I worked 6 days and rested on the 7th. 40 years later, Moses is near the end of his life. He knows that he's soon going to pass away. And so Moshe gives a farewell speech to the Jewish people. It was a 37-day long speech. It was quite long. He taught all rabbis how to talk for a long time. We're all trying to emulate him. The speech is the entire book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. It's called Deuteronomy Duet. It's the second time. The whole book of the Torah, the last book is like a Mishnah Torah repetition. So Moshe repeats to the Jewish people a reminder of the 10 commandments that we heard from God at Mount Sinai. However, here's where it gets a little crazy. When Moses repeats the 10 commandments to the Jewish people, there are some changes between the way God said it and between the way Moses said it. How could that be? Good question. Yes, 37 days, Stefan. That's right. 37-day long speech. They could be they had a bathroom break in the middle, but I don't know. You ready? You want to see what he says in Moses? So if you're watching at home, go get a Chumash and open to the book of Deuteronomy, book of Devarim, chapter 5. If you're on my personal page, you'll see right in front of you on the screen. Keep the Shabbos day. And you guys pay attention. Tell me where the differences are, okay? The beginning is pretty similar. You'll see where it gets totally different. Keep the Shabbos day to sanctify it, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days may you work and perform all your labor, but the 7th day is a Shabbat to the Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your ox, your donkey, any of your livestock, nor the stranger who is within your cities, in order that your manservant and your maidservant may rest like you. Ready for this part? There was already a little more details, but the gist has been the same. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God took you out from there with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm. Therefore, remember that word therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Shabbos day. Oh boy. Okay, what is the reason why we're keeping Shabbos according to Moses? Nothing to do with creation. Nothing is mentioned about 6 days God worked and he rested on the 7th. It's not there. A whole new reason. According to the Moses version of the 10 Commandments, why are we resting on the 7th day of the week? Tell me, why are we resting on the 7th day of the week?
Because is it that he created us? Like God created us as a nation. That's why he took us out of Egypt.
Well, God created us as a nation out of Egypt because he wants us to serve him, of course.
Right, but I'm saying, like, is it a different kind of creation? Taking us out of Egypt versus creating us to begin with?
Say again.
I'm thinking it's got to be like the same thing, like creation. So I'm thinking that he created us to be his.
Okay, let's go slow this verse off. What's the reason that Moses is saying why we should keep the Shabbos? Someone tell me. I'm looking at the chats. To remember the fact that God took us out of Egypt. So when we rest, we worked, we were slaves. Let me just explain what it's saying simply. We were slaves, and then God gave us freedom. So by not working on Saturday, not being a slave to your boss, to the TV, to whatever it is, you're remembering the Exodus from Egypt. Now, it's a nice reason, but it ain't the one that God said, right? So how do we explain this? Or why are we really keeping Shabbos? Is it to remember why God took the world in 6 days? Or is it to remember that God took us out of Egypt? Which one is it? It could, but each one is kind of like there's two very different things. Not a contradiction, but they're not the same thing at all. So, you guys ready to think with me? You ready to think? Let's think. What would be the difference practically between these two reasons on who is obligated to keep Shabbos? I'll help you. If the reason for keeping Shabbos is to remember that God created the universe in 6 days and rested on the seventh, then who should be keeping Shabbos? All of humanity. Any single human being that was created during those 6 days of creation, which is every single person that's alive in the world, should be keeping Shabbos. Right? What? And the animals, which means that you don't let your animals work. Correct. The animal of a Jew, you are 100% correct. The animal of the Jew is not allowed to work on Shabbos either. The slave of the Jew is not allowed to work on Shabbos either. So you're not, all of the world should rest on Shabbos. That's how God made the world. He made it in 6 days, rested on the seventh. So really, everyone, the whole world should be resting on Shabbos to remember creation. In the second set of tablets, the emphasis over here is not on God's creation of the universe. The emphasis is on the specific liberation of the Jewish people from our own personal slavery, which means that Shabbos is something uniquely Jewish. It's a uniquely Jewish way to remember and to celebrate our freedom from Egypt is through celebrating Shabbos. Yeah, but why is it sacred? Because you were taken out of Egypt. Meaning, your non-Jewish neighbor that was never a slave in Egypt doesn't have that need to celebrate Shabbos because they're not commemorating our exodus from Egypt. Which is why there's no contradiction between the two reasons given. In Deuteronomy, in the Moses version, he's saying to the Jewish people, what's the point of Moses repeating the Ten Commandments? He's telling the Jewish people, here guys, listen, I'm talking to you. This is what you got to do, right? He's trying to drill home the message that they had heard from God, but as they're about to enter the land of Israel, they may forget. So he's trying to say, listen, I'm talking to you. This is, God came to you, and you should understand that you have a unique covenant. We, alone, among all the people in the universe, you Jews, you people that were taken out of Egypt, you have a covenant with God, and to remember this covenant of creation, you have to keep the Shabbos. Understand the difference? One really seems to be for all of humanity, and the second time when Moses is talking, he's talking to specifically the Jewish people. So which one do we focus on? When we celebrate Shabbos today, what are we focusing on? So if we open up a prayer book and we look in the prayer book, I copied it to the English, but it's too long, and I'll read to you from the morning prayers of Shabbat, Shabbos morning. This is right out of the Amidah on Shabbos morning. So this is the prayer. Okay? Yismach Moshe b'manas chalka. Moshe rejoiced in the gift of his portion. You gave him, you called him a faithful servant. You gave him a crown for his head as he stood before you on Mount Sinai. And he brought down 2 tablets of stone in his hand, on which was inscribed the observance of Shabbat. And so it is written in your Torah. You can look in page 213 if you want to look. Right? You gave him the 10 commandments, 2 tablets of stone, on which is written in your Torah. What does it say is written in the Torah? Listen and tell me if it sounds like the 10 commandments that I'm going to read to you next. The children of Israel shall observe the Shabbat, establishing the Shabbat throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel for all time. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he ceased from work and rested. That doesn't sound like either. He didn't say about the creation. He mentions creation. But he talks about there being a covenant, Shabbat being a covenant between us and God, a sign between me and the children of Israel for all time. The 10 commandments say anything about a sign between us and God? A covenant? One second, let me finish this thought. The 10 commandments say anything about a covenant? No. So
all a contract between us and God?
yes, but specifically Shabbos. It says he came down with the tablets in which he wrote about Shabbat, which is a covenant. That's what is written in the Torah. But the quote in the Amidah is not from the 10 commandments. You know where it's from? It's from chapter 31. So let's go back to the papers for a third time, my friends. Don't worry, we're not going to let you stay lost, I promise. Chapter 31 is still in the book of Exodus. Here we again are told this is the end of the building of the Mishkan. Okay, we're building the Mishkan. The Jews are collecting all the wood and all the gold and all the silver to build a home Moses, speak to the Jewish people and say to them, only keep my Shabbos, for it is a sign between me and you for your generations, to know that I, the Lord, make you holy. Therefore, it says God, this is the third therefore, keep the Shabbos, ki kodesh hi lachem, for it is a sacred thing for you. Those who desecrate it shall be put to death. Whoever performs work on it, that soul will be cut off from the midst of its people. 6 days, turn the page over, verse number 15. 6 days, but on the seventh day, it is the Shabbos of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever performs work on the Shabbos day shall be put to death. Thus shall the children of Israel observe the Shabbos, to make the Shabbos throughout the generations as an everlasting covenant between me and the children of Israel. It is forever a sign that in 6 days the Lord created the heaven and the earth. On the seventh day, he ceased and rested. This chapter, chapter 31, where God is reminding the Jewish people not to work in building the house of God on Shabbos, says something far, far more dramatic than the Ten Commandments says. The Ten Commandments just said, keep the Shabbos, remember I made the world in 6 days. Here, God is saying to the Jewish people, keep my Shabbos, for it is a sign between me and you for your generations, to know that I am the Lord who made you holy. Keep the Shabbos, for it is sacred to you. Verse 16, that you should observe the Shabbos as what? What does it say in verse number 16? What is the reason why we keep the Shabbos? It's a bris olam, an everlasting covenant between us and God. Here, the reason why we're observing the Shabbat that he's saying over here in these verses is because Shabbos is, I was looking at verse 17, between me and the children of Israel, it is a forever sign. It's an eternal sign. It's an everlasting sign. To remember that God made the world in 6 days. But the point is, what is Shabbos really? What is Shabbos really? It's a covenant. Excellent. Shabbos is a covenant between us and Hashem. Which is why in the prayers, when we want to talk about the gift of Shabbos, and we start by reading that God, you sent Moses down the mountain with the 2 stone tablets in his hand, and so too you wrote in your Torah. We don't quote from the 10 Commandments. We just read, we're saying, this Shabbos, pay attention. We say, God, you gave Moses to bring down 2 tablets of stone in his hands. But we don't quote from the tablets of stone. Instead, we quote from chapter 31, which says this verse, that the children of Israel shall observe Shabbat, establishing it throughout the generations as an everlasting covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel for all time, that God made the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. So the reason why we're keeping Shabbat is not because God worked 6 days and rested on the seventh. Not even because he took us out of Egypt, but it's a covenant, which is, by the way, you ready for this? You may know that since Shabbos is the sign of that special covenant, who's allowed to keep Shabbos? Only a Jew is allowed to keep Shabbos. A non-Jew is not supposed to keep Shabbos. The Talmud says a non-Jew keeps Shabbos will be put to death. When the non-Jew is going through the conversion process and they have to practice living a life of Torah observance, living a life of keeping Shabbat, they can't fully keep the Shabbos. They have to do one thing to break the Shabbos. Really. They have to do something to violate the Shabbos. Only Jews are allowed to keep it. Let me read to you the very next paragraph of the Amidah we say every Shabbat morning. And you, Lord our God, did not give the Shabbos to the nations of the world, nor did you, our King, grant it as a heritage to idol worshippers, nor can the uncircumcised participate in its rest. For you have given it in love to your people Israel, to the descendants of Jacob, whom you have chosen. Those who observe the Shabbos and call it a delight shall rejoice in your kingship. The nation which sanctifies the seventh day, all shall be satiated and delighted with your goodness. You are pleased with the seventh day. You made it holy. You called it the most desirable of all days. It is clear that only a Jew keeps Shabbos. God did not give the gift of Shabbos to the non-Jews. And isn't that an amazing thing? That throughout all of history, no matter where in the world Jews have existed, despite the extreme travails and tribulations and struggles of being a Jew in many, many different places and times of history, there have always been Jews that have kept Shabbos as a sign of this covenant, the Os La'olam, that's an eternal sign, a bris olam, an eternal covenant. And nations have known if you want to destroy the Jewish people, what do you need to do? Take away their Shabbos. A thing against the Jews has been Shabbos. Some have used barbaric force, others tried to persecute us, some humiliated us. And the Romans and the Greeks, they used to make fun of the Jews that they're a wasteful people. That was one of the main arguments against the Jewish people, that they're a wasteful people. They don't work with real good work ethic because they believe in taking a day off of work. Right? And in their eyes, the ambitious Romans, to have a day off of work was preposterous. It was crazy. Only much later did people realize that there's actually a physiological advantage to taking a day of rest and allowing your body to reinvigorate and to recuperate. And then what happened? Think about this for a second. So the Gentiles realized we should have a day of rest. And what happened? For whatever reason, their day of rest is not on Shabbos. They copy our Bible. I don't know how it happened. I don't care how it happened. I don't want to know how it happened. But somehow it happened that history would make it that the whole world that copies our Bible does not keep our Shabbos. The Christians somehow changed it from Saturday to Sunday. And Muslims who later come and also based on Judaism will somehow change it to Friday. Because who would be left with the covenant between us and God? Us and nobody else. This is the unique sign of the relationship between us and God Almighty. And that's why it remained unique and incontestable. And there's no other nation in the world that can say we also have Shabbos. We have Sunday, we have Friday. They have similar ideas. They understand today. They finished making fun of us that we rest and that they work harder than us. So now they accept us. They accept the idea, but they don't do it like us. Our Shabbos is a unique gift that exists only between each other. Between us and Hashem and no one else. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So now I ask you a question. Is it over clear? Everything I said is clear? Because we didn't get it the first time. Who didn't get it the first time? The Christian? I don't know. Okay. So why is it that of all the things that God chooses to be the sign of his covenant between us and his chosen people, the sign that God chose is Shabbos? Meaning God could have chosen praying to be the sign between the Jew. He could have made the Challah the sign between the Jews. There's actually three things that are called a bris, a covenant. One is the circumcision. One is Torah is also called a bris, and Shabbos is called a bris, a covenant. So Shabbos is not exclusive. You're right. Circumcision is also a sign of the covenant. But why about Shabbos? For women also. Why of all the 613 commandments, of all of the things that God tells humanity to do, you would think that Shabbos should be something that belongs to all of humanity. Right? If the reason is because God rested on the seventh day, the whole world should have a day of rest. It's also good for you. Today, psychologically, first of all, your body physiologically needs a day of rest. And psychologically, to have a family unit, to have a day when you spiritually rejuvenate and come home and you with the family have a dinner and these things. Today, the idea of unplugging and I could spend a long time explaining to you the physical benefits of having a day of rest. But my question to you is, we've established that the real reason why we're keeping Shabbos is because God made the Shabbos a covenant between us and him. That's the reason why we keep Shabbos. God says it clearly. When we're building the Mishkan, make me a home, but Shabbos is more important than my home. Because Shabbos is my covenant between you and me. So why is it that Shabbos is this sign of the covenant between us and God? Any idea?
Because the other religions didn't follow what God wanted.
They didn't follow, the other nations didn't follow what God wanted. On the other hand, God didn't tell them to.
Because work is special.
So there's a question, why would a Christian have to break a rule on Shabbos? So the answer is, as I said, because Shabbos is a unique covenant between us and God, and therefore only a Jew can keep Shabbos. And a non-Jew who's going through a conversion process should do one small thing when no one's looking to break the Shabbos until they convert. And then the first time that they keep Shabbos 100% is the Shabbos after their conversion. It's a joke, but it's going to be confusing, whatever. So why is Shabbos a sign of our covenant? So let's go back to the reason given in the Ten Commandments. The one in the second version. Now, why do we keep Shabbos? To remember our exodus from Egypt. What happened when we left Egypt?
He made us a
A nation
nation for him.
a nation of free men, right? We became free. We were slaves, and now we became a nation of free people. I shouldn't say men, free people. Shabbos is teaching us what is the nature of freedom. To be free does not only mean that I cast off the shackles of my bondage. It doesn't mean I went from being subjugated by one nation to no longer being under the control of another nation. You're a master of your time, correct. Meaning, Shabbos is to demonstrate to a person that not only can I free myself from the slavery and the shackles of somebody else, but that I can be a master over my time and free myself from my own self-imposed shackles. I think I'm addicted to my phone. I think I'm addicted to being in control and planning and this. And Shabbos tells you smoking cigarettes, watching TV, watching the news, whatever it is. You're addicted. You think that you're enslaved. You think that you're in Egypt. You can't help it. You have to answer the questions of your boss. Of course it's Steve. God took us out of Egypt. What did God do when he took us out of Egypt? He just physically took us from slavery, building pyramids. He did much, much more than that. God taught us what does it mean to be truly free in the image of God. All week we have pressure. All week we have stress. We have bills. We have jobs. We have whatever. And then he knows coming Shabbos, either it's 2 days in front of me or it just came, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and the Jew knows I'm not a slave to Egypt. I'm not a slave to anybody because I am in a covenant with God. I am in a covenant with God, and there's nothing else that can hold me down. Not the Broadway show that Dudu Fisher wants, not the Hamas terrorists that are holding Eli Sharabi and Or Levi in captivity, not the Israeli media that wants to get pictures of Merav Alba going to see her daughter, Merav Burgersar going to see her daughter. There's nothing in the world that's holding me back. There's no shackles. There's no chains. They're in captivity in Gaza. They're in right now. These two young men are in a tunnel. What's the name? Elia Cohen and Alon Ohel. They're right now. Elia and Alon are right now chained in the tunnel and will come Friday. And they will make Kiddush, because even though they may physically be in chains, God made a covenant with them that they are masters over their time. God made a covenant with them that they're not enslaved to anybody. And this is the message for the Jewish people, that even though we live in the world and we have sometimes our own slaveries, whatever our slavery is, whether it's an addiction, whether it's a need, whether it's a craving, whether it's a boss, whether it's a bill, whether it's a problem we're dealing with, we all have our things that are weighing us down like a yoke of bondage on us that we feel is limiting us. And then comes Shabbos, and Shabbos reminds us of the fact that God took us out of Egypt. Shabbos reminds us of the covenant and the sign that exists forever between us and God. Will free us from our phones, free us from our technology, free us from our emails, free us from anything we it allows us to go to meditate, to learn, to tap into ourselves, and to be free, because we're able to turn off all the outside noise and turn within. It's a beautiful idea, no? I'll tell you one more thing. Hashem,
It's a beautiful idea, it's a beautiful thing.
it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way to live life.
Yes.
It's a beautiful way to live life. Otherwise, you become so helpless. You can't escape. You can't escape it. No one could escape Egypt. No slave ever escaped Egypt. And today in America, you see people that are enslaved to whatever it is, the media, their work. They can't get away. Their phones. They can't escape. But a Jew has a covenant with God. And I'm also addicted to my phone. But Shabbos comes, a holiday can come, the phone gets turned off, the whole world can need me. It's too bad. I'm a free man. I'm a free man. That's beautiful.
Did you ever experience, like, last Saturday, so Shabbos ended, I think, 6:45, and somebody was at my condo and turned off all my lights, and I couldn't turn on any lights, but I could see what time it was by the stove. And I knew it ended at 6:45. It didn't matter. I just sat there in the dark.
Because you felt that freedom. And the moment you make Havdalah, it's over, of course.
And it was so
There's been
peaceful.
many times I did it on Shabbos.
Right, and you don't get it until you do it.
Correct. Oh, correct. What Marsha just said, I'm going to repeat it. It's so beautiful. You don't get it till you do it. Because you can talk about freedom as an intellectual idea. A slave that's never experienced freedom, a slave that was born in slavery doesn't know what freedom is. They're conditioned. An animal that's in the zoo, born in the zoo, doesn't know that they need to be something different. Right? They say the famous, classic, beautiful joke about this camel that's talking to its mother. Says, "Mama camel, tell me, why do we have these big humps on our back?" And the mama camel says, "Because when we go through the desert, we can go for many, many days without water, so we need to store lots of water in our humps, so we can go for many days without drinking." Okay, interesting. And why do we have such wide, flat feet? So the mama camel tells the little baby camel, says, when we walk in the sand of the desert, you don't want to sink into the sand. We need flat feet to make sure we don't sink in the sand. And tell me, says the little baby camel the next day, why do such big eyebrows? So, because sometimes there's sandstorms. We need to make sure we don't get sand in our eyes so we don't get lost. So little camel thinks, I don't get it. If we have big humps to carry water, and we have flat feet to walk on the sand, and we have big eyebrows for sandstorms, then what are we doing in the Bronx Zoo? If you're born into slavery, if you're born in captivity, you don't even know what you're missing. Animals born in the zoo don't know that they're missing out on the freedom of the lions that are free in the jungle. Yes, and you're right. People have never experienced the freedom of Shabbos and the freedom of being able to be a master over their own addiction and turning off their phone doesn't understand what it means, and they'll never understand. Just like you can't explain chocolate to someone that never ate chocolate. You can't explain the feeling of Shabbos till you live Shabbos.
So whoever wants to experience a Shabbos,
Come to Shabbat in the Heights.
oh yeah, come to
Shabbat in the Heights. I have to send out an email about it because I read so we have to send out an email. We're going to be doing a Shabbat in the Heights. First, you come any Shabbos, but you want to go to New York for Shabbat in the Heights and really experience the Shabbat. Totally yeah. Or come to Marsha's house.
Come to my condo.
Or come to Marsha. Marsha's inviting you over. You can stay in Marsha's house for Shabbos and you can experience it. There you go. You got a deal. Come to Marsha, leave your phone in the car, and experience Shabbos. No, it's 100%. Let me tell you, my friends, I have a story to tell. A beautiful teaching. What did Moses say to the Jewish people? He says to them the 10 Commandments. Remember, so the first 10 Commandments, who's talking? God is talking. So when God is talking, God says, I made the world in 6 days. I want you to rest on the seventh. He's speaking from his perspective. But when Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people, Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people from their perspective, right? From us. From us, we need to remember the covenant. We need to remember that we were taken out of slavery. So what does Moshe say? If you pay careful attention, I'll go back to the verses in Deuteronomy for a second. I close the screen 1 second. There we go. If you go back to the verse, what verse is it? 1 second. Verse, Deuteronomy chapter 5. Verse 15, what does he say to him? What does Moshe say to the Jewish people? In verse 15, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that God took you out from with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Shabbos day. Remembered you were a slave in Egypt? Could a Jew forget they were a slave in Egypt?
Nope.
Could they forget? It's like say to a Jew today, don't forget about the Holocaust. Don't forget about October 7th. Anyone today can forget October 7th, like something's wrong. They need to be examined. What does it mean? What is Moshe saying to the Jewish people? Don't forget that you were once slaves. What is that supposed to mean? And what's the answer? It's a beautiful explanation. Moshe is not telling them to remember the fact that they were physically spent time as slaves building pyramids in Egypt. Moshe is warning them. Don't forget the moral degeneration that accompanies enslavement. Don't forget the moral degeneration, how you decay, how you lose control over yourself. Don't forget what it means to be a slave where you lose mastery over your time, where you lose mastery over your own head, where you get to choose what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. Remember you were slaves. Remember you were once at the helpless whims of somebody else. Remember that? So you don't go back there. The world is a dangerous place. The world is a dangerous place. The world is a world that, like quicksand, sucks us in. Media is designed by psychologists to know how to suck us in. Technology is designed to suck us in. Our Yetzer Hara wants our problems to overwhelm us and suck us in. And so whatever problem we're dealing with becomes overwhelming, becomes too stressful, becomes too much. And we begin to become slaves to the modern day Egypt. As Moses says to the Jewish people, and he repeats the Ten Commandments, remember that you were once slaves and God took you out. God gave you the chance to have and to never be a slave ever again. Not to Egypt, not to technology, not to your friend, not to your boss, not to your relative. You have the chance to be a free person. That's the covenant that God made with the Jewish people. And that's something very, 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 very special. Just don't get chained down to your struggle for daily bread, to your physical things. Stay with me, and I'll keep you forever. Okay, I'll end with a story, a beautiful story of a man. I watched today the story of the guy saying it. You know, I knew it if I just to Google to find the exact name and the details. So his name is Ami Pikovsky. He was living in Los Angeles. He had a massive clothing store on one of the main streets of Los Angeles. It was a massive store, street to street, the full full block, massive store. This is in the 80s, 70s, 80s, when people still went shopping in stores, and big stores were a good thing, and that you were successful. And he started becoming more and more and more religious, and he really wanted to close the store on Shabbat. Now, he knew it would be crazy to do it because 90% of his business was on Shabbat. That was the most important day of the week. He made 10 grand on Shabbos, and he could go a regular day making $100, $150 on a regular day and $10,000 on Shabbos. So it was incomparable, the business, but he knew that he has to keep Shabbos. So he was trying to find someone to take over his store, but he couldn't get rid of it. And he knew his biggest fear was that the landlord had told him when he signed the lease that you're taking the whole property, and if you ever try to break this lease, I'll go after you till the day you die. Like, he knew this landlord was not going to play around, and he knew there was no way he could break the lease. The landlord would never let him break the lease, and he's screwed. He tries to go to some of his friends who are in the business. They want to take over the lease. No one wanted it. It was too big. It was too much. No one wanted it. So finally, one day, he decided to sit. I have to keep Shabbos, and no matter what, it will be what it will be. Whatever happens to me. And he sat and he wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He wrote to the Rebbe. He said, Rebbe, I want to make the commitment to keep Shabbos. I'm asking for a blessing that I won't get hurt. He was afraid he would get really hurt financially. He would be destroyed by this landlord closing the store on Shabbos. He's breaking the lease, and the landlord will go after him. He writes a letter to the Rebbe. 2 weeks later, he gets a letter back in the mail. And in the letter, the Rebbe, first of all, enclosed $18, one $10, one $5, one $2 bill, and one $1 bill. The Rebbe told him three things. to make sure to keep Shabbos from sunsets. Be very careful and have tremendous blessings from it. To give from this money to charity and to spread Torah with joy. He got that letter with the $18 from the Rebbe. She gave to charity. He felt this invigoration, this strength, this, I can do it. I'm not a slave to my landlord. I'm not a slave to my store. I can break free. And so he takes the letter right away. He goes to the landlord to go tell him that he's breaking the lease and see what happens. He's returning the lease. He's giving him the story. He comes. The landlord's not in the office. Okay. He goes back to his store. Now all of a sudden the guy walks in. He says, you're Amit Bukovsky, yeah? He says, I want to buy the building. This was a very central location in LA. It's a massive building, right? A full square block. So I want to buy the building. So what are you talking to me? Go speak to the landlord. I don't own the building. He said, yeah, I want to buy it, but the landlord told me that you're holding the lease to the building, and I need to buy you out to get you to break your lease. I need to buy out your lease from you. So he says, okay, how much are you offering? And he was desperate. You understand? He was going to his friend to just take it over from him for free, just to take the lease off of his head that he wouldn't have the responsibility to be sued by the landlord. So he didn't know what to ask for. So he says to this guy, you want me to break my lease? What are you offering? And the guy named him a sum. He said, not gonna say he didn't say the amount. It was so big, he was with that money, he was able to buy himself a house and open a manufacturing business with the money he made from selling his store. And like that, he said, okay, you got a deal. The guy wrote him out a check. He no longer had a lease, no longer had a store. He had a check to buy a home, to buy a factory. And he saw immediately how once he went with that commitment, he walked into the landlord and said, I'm closing the store on Shabbos. So Talmud tells us whoever keeps Shabbos, Shabbos keeps them. We saw it 2 weeks ago with the Gamburger. We see it now. And God willing, in the schus of Shabbos, in the merit of keeping Shabbos, and not allowing ourselves internally to be enslaved and manipulated by the forces of the world around us, very, very, very soon, we'll see in a physical way how the world is not a slave over us, that we're free people, physically free, with the coming of Mashiach, God willing, very, very soon, when the whole world will see the beauty of Shabbos, God willing. Good night, my friends. Hey, that is the story. Yes. Elia and Alon, both of them. That's true. El. Yeah. So there's a question: if a Christian didn't break a rule and kept Shabbos, then they violated. They were part of a covenant. It's not to them. They went to a place where they don't belong. Even though the Ten Commandments, theoretically, you would think this is a question I'm getting on Facebook, are applicable to the Christians. They claim to, but somehow God made it, and I don't know the story. But somehow they ended up with Sunday instead of Saturday, because Saturday is our day. It's our covenant. Okay, my friends. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Stephanie. You were on the ball today, Stephanie. Thank you, Jessica. I'm glad that you enjoyed. Keep on learning. The question is over here from Carmen: if we do Shabbos honor and bring hostages, is not a good mitzvah? Of course, it's a good mitzvah. I don't understand your question, Carmen. Of course, it's a good mitzvah. It's a good mitzvah regardless, and every mitzvah should bring more merit to the hostages. Absolutely. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Art. I'm glad you enjoyed. Thank you. I hope Shiana. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for watching all the way from Olympia, Washington. We're glad you were part of the evening. Thank you, Lori. Erev Tov. Thank you, Morley. Okay, Steve, you have to give Michelle a review of the class. Oh. Good night, my friends. Laila Tov. Thank you, Gail. I'm glad you enjoyed. Thank you, Joe. Should I say the joke? It's fine. Should I try the joke? I'll tell you a joke. Another joke? It's a Jewish joke. Rick will get the joke. So I said, this is also for Marsha, for Shiana. So there was a Jew who had a daily study partner with a friend. His son he had a baby. So he told a friend, I want to honor you to hold the baby at the bris, or to say a blessing, or maybe say a blessing at the wedding. So his friend, who he studies Gemara with him every single day, tells him, I have to tell you the truth. I'm not Jewish. So I can't make a blessing, I'm not Jewish. He's not Jewish. You come to yeshiva and we learn together every day. He says, I love the learning. The Talmud is just so beautiful, so brilliant, so amazing. So I love learning. So I pretend to be Jewish and come learn, but I'm not Jewish. Yeah, I was just thinking of that. And so he says, But don't you know you're not allowed to keep Shabbos? You keep Shabbos, so the non-Jew keeps Shabbos, will be put to death. So this non-Jewish, pretending to be religious person says to his study partner, don't worry, I carry a key in my pocket so that I'm violating the Shabbos. I carry a key in my pocket, so I'm carrying on Shabbos. You're carrying on Shabbos. We have an Eruv in the city. An Eruv allows you to carry. She says, no, I'm very religious. I don't trust the rabbis of that Eruv. I don't believe in it. So he's not Jewish, but he like doesn't keep the anyway. Okay. You got that kick, Baruch Hashem. Anyway. Laila Tov, my friends. Good night, Edward. I'm glad you enjoyed from Troy. Okay. Tomorrow night, please join us. Rick, go back to your yeshiva days. Yeah.